Hello and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. We're your host, Atlas Alex, and we're glad that you could join us this afternoon at our usual time on our usual day. As the title of today's live stream promised, we would be exploring what could very well be the perfect analogy for life. And in the description for today's live stream, we described a handful of the many, many countless allegories and analogies that have been used throughout history by prophets and philosophers and poets, every conceivable type of person, in an attempt to give us a working prototype, a case analysis for the nature of our very existence. And as we mentioned, some of these allegories include Plato's allegory of the cave. They include Shakespeare's statement that all the world's a stage. It includes the game of chess. And in contemporary philosophy, even game theory itself, it's expanded to include all games. And we ourselves have used games as an analogy. We have written a blog article about it, and we've included in the chapter in our book on technology an entire section explaining how MMORPGs and games in general give us an excellent insight into the nature of reality and the false nature of our reality. This reality that we take for granted is so very real. But what a lot of these analogies and allegories fail to capture, fail to convey, is the aspect of our existence which is very much beyond our control. It's outside of our purview. It's outside of our capacity to know in our present state. In other words, using analogies such as games or the stage, you see, an actor on the stage knows that they're acting. Someone playing a game knows that they're playing a game. We can try to extrapolate and explain to people to imagine yourself trapped in the character and not knowing that you're a character in a game. But this is a level of abstraction which is beyond the capacity of most people to grasp. Most people just see themselves as the player, despite the fact that when they're playing the game, they're absolutely losing themselves in the game, and they can lose themselves in the game for hours. But they never truly lose sight of the fact that they're a player playing a game. So Plato's analogy of the cave is a little bit closer to our actual state of existence, because he points out that everybody is enamored, hypnotized, mesmerized by the shadows projected on the wall. They believe that that's reality. But in fact, those are just shadowy reflections. Those are the shadows of themselves that are being projected by the light. But again, this, despite the fact that Plato wrote that allegory thousands of years before Christ, it was one that never really made it into the collective consciousness of humanity. Humanity fails to recognize the validity of Plato's allegory, the fact that life is illusory, reality as we know it is an illusion. And it's the fact that humanity has yet to awaken to that well and truly and accept that as a fundamental nature of reality. Right now, there are theoretical physicists and mathematicians and others on the periphery of the sciences that are approaching things like simulation theory and other explanations of reality, but they're beginning to come around to the reality that everything that we experience internally, that there is nothing out there. Everything that exists takes place in a field of consciousness. And everything that we experience that appears to be out there in the world isn't really there. And they're beginning to come around to this understanding. They're trying to come at it from mathematical, computational, physical, theoretical, particle physics, all these sorts of angles that, of course, are their areas of expertise, but also through their own experience. Many of them, when they have meditated, have experienced a state of being that they recognize is something other than out there, and yet there is still something in here. So for the vast majority of humanity, reality is still fundamental. The plane of existence that we are on and the self that we identify with is still somehow fundamental to who we are. And in this respect, the Matrix films were, of all the contemporary mythologies that we have, the Matrix films that were released at the beginning of the new millennium captured this aspect that humanity is asleep and that we're trapped in a matrix, and that mechanical nature, our many egos which work for mechanical nature, are siphoning our precious vital energies. And they do so through hypnosis and ignorance by putting us to sleep. And in the Matrix films, they literally showed that. I mean, that's the power of science fiction as an allegorical device. And yet, despite the fact that in the Matrix, the world was literally shown a very, very thinly veiled allegory to what the actual state of humanity is, humanity still didn't get it. Because of ego mind, because of the rational mind, and because that it is under the control of the artificial intelligence egos that are enslaving us, the rational mind cleverly projected the Matrix allegory onto the world. And that all the conspiracy theories and all the global elites and the shadow governments and all that, they were what were creating this artificial reality out there, this matrix that's shown in the mainstream media and on television, et cetera, that everybody believes in, and mainstream science and history, et cetera. And so that's the matrix that we have to escape from. And it just fueled all these conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. They talk about being red-pilled, and how when you wake up from the matrix, you realize all the ways in which you are enslaved by the system and by the elites and by the banksters and all the rest of it. So very cleverly, the ego mind externalized the allegory instead of allowing people to sit and comprehend that the matrix mythology was a very, very, very thinly veiled analogy. It was so close to what is actually taking place because it's mechanical nature. It's the AI that is at war with humanity, and the AI relies on humanity's precious natural resources, and so that's why they enslave us. So as we faced this week our own struggles with mechanical nature and our own very personal relationship with an entity that was very much after our human resources, we were contemplating why we suffer and why we are made to suffer. And two words came to us. And those words were, hang on a second. Well, let's make this a little bigger. The words that came to us were escape and escapism. Now, I guess before we continue, there's a couple quick comments here. Let's get these taken care of. Tiffany says, "Good morning, everyone," and cheers. And Benjamin says, "Hello, sir." Hello, everyone. We're glad that you could join us. Okay, so escape and escapism. Have you ever contemplated what the difference? Oh, Jennifer also says hello. Hello, Jennifer. Nice to have you here. So, have you ever considered what the difference between the two is? Because clearly, escape is not equal to escapism. What's the difference? For the past, 12 weeks, we focused on the Alm of Life. We focused on revolutionary sexuality and love. We focused on meditation. to help us comprehend and eliminate our egos, that which enslave us, right? So escape means a certain something to us. But this past week, as we've been struggling with the usual that we struggle with regularly, but about every month as we approach the full moon, and tomorrow night will be the full moon. We were presented with opportunities for escapism. Jennifer says escapism is a lifestyle, while escape is a one-time action. So the implication here is that escape is permanent. And escapism is ongoing. If it's a lifestyle, that means it goes on and on, right? So it's an ongoing lifestyle. Whereas escape is, as Tiffany suggests here, escape, see ya, and escapism is like an avoidance. So again, this escape relates to it, so there's a permanence there. So escape suggests that what you're escaping from is gone from your life. There's an elimination there. So it's no longer present. If we can write that as non-presence. We could maybe use the word prescience. She said, SYA is save your ass. You better type things out in full for us all the time, because we don't know any of these internetisms. We don't know any of these short form vernaculars. So if you write them as like that, we won't get it 99% of the time, because we don't tweet, we don't use Twitter, we don't know any of these short forms. So so to escape means what you're escaping from is no longer affecting you. But escapism of that which is. So we could maybe make this simple here. When you escape something, it's no longer affecting you. It isn't a part of your life anymore. But escapism is avoidance of that which is still very much a part of your life. It is still very much affecting you. So again, this relates to this notion that while escapism is that's not what we want. What we want here. Yeah, select. Okay. Why can't we? Well, it forgot to bring the T with us. So we're going to add the T down here. And we're just going to erase this while we try to arrange everything and make sense of this. So escapism is temporary. And we're going to go back here and we're going to say one time. Okay. So escape one time versus ongoing. Escaping, so the elimination or that which is no longer part of your life versus avoidance of that which is still very much a part of your life. And permanent versus temporary. Generally speaking, when you look at the world, what does the world offer in terms of pain, in terms of suffering? What does the world offer and what does the world deal in, generally speaking? Unless, of course, somebody has other things to add to the list. Okay, no, fair enough. Okay, so we have Tiffany says fear, and Benjamin says sedatives. So just in terms of, if you were to choose one of these two words, right? And Tiffany says, she says, agree, the list could go on, but let's stick just for a moment. If you had to choose between, does the world offer us A or B? Does the world offer us escape or escapism? What, generally speaking, are we given? What's our option, generally speaking? This is where we, as we were meditating on this, it sort of became clear that, even if you look at allopathic healthcare, or, right, the world does not offer much in the way of escape, in true escape. But the world offers plenty examples of escapism. And if you wanted to, as Tiffany suggests here, if we wanted to make a list of types of escapism, we could, for example, include under here all the entertainments, all of the substances, Benjamin says we're consumers, right? So escapism. This is another interesting thing that we could add to the nature of. Why can't I? No, where's my template? Oh, there it is. There we go. Let's move this. Oh. You're going to have to bear with us, everyone, because when we're going through our when we're suffering from depression, when we're facing what we're facing right now, nothing works. Everything's a constant disaster. Everything is just like absolutely, there's no synchronicities. It's like everything is just a complete and total and utter disaster for us. It's been that way all week, and it'll be that way probably until the full moon passes. everything, technological problems, our shoulder broke essentially, not literally, but the shoulder being the most complex joint in the body. We have a bad shoulder to begin with, and it's just acted up out of nowhere. The weather's been bad. Jennifer says she's had the same sort of week. Well, we're getting close to a full moon, and we're getting close to a solar eclipse. So there might be something on the horizon. We're not sure. Anyway, it's been that kind of a week. So it might be that kind of a live stream. Anyway, Benjamin added a word here that we want to add to our list under escapism. Escapism is something that you consume. Oh, and Jennifer says that there's a lunar eclipse this evening too. Oh, okay. Well, okay. So on the side of escapism, you don't consume escape, right? You have to create, or you have to make it happen. You make your escape. You can't consume an escape, right? So something else that came to mind about the types of escapism: entertainment, substances. Now, substances can mean many things. So there's substances as in drugs, but then we're going to include also here food, because that's our drug. That's our drug, right? We don't do any other drugs. We don't need any other drugs. Sugar and chocolate and salt and fat and carbohydrates, right? That's, and the combination of those things in those highly palatable, crunchy munchy type things, right? The junk food, garbage junk food. But boy, oh boy, when we get into a place where it's just, then the that's why we're made to suffer. We're made to suffer to seek escapism, to seek where we seek escape, but in the absence of an ability to escape, we are presented with an endless variety of escapism. See, the ego mind, there's only one form of escape that the ego mind ever presents to us. It's when we've run out of options for escapism. When we can see no other way out. Right? The ego mind will give us, quote, an escape. It's the only escape that the ego mind will legitimately offer us to be free of our suffering. It'll never show us how to be free of it, which is the cause of our suffering. But it will, and it has, and it does recommend to many people to take their own life. That's the only, quote, escape that the ego mind will ever offer. I mean, sure, in other respects, escaping a marriage, for example, escaping a bad situation, running away from home. I mean, these are all forms of escape. So, but really running away from home or running away from a marriage or whatever, it's it's you could call it an escape of sorts, and you could probably argue that what Tiffany said earlier applies in those cases where fear is what's being used to motivate such escapes. So you quit your job, you run away from home, you leave your spouse, you leave your city, you leave your country, you just leave everything behind, and you seek to get away from it all. But in reality, and we wanted to write because this is a big one, this tourism and travel. Those are, again, temporary escapes because you can't escape yourself. And all of the problems in your life are orbiting around you because they are there to try to help you to see the cause of your suffering within. So your ego convincing you to run away, to move to another city or to move to another town, or to switch life partners, get out of the relationship you're in and find a new relationship, it's just temporary. Because if you're in a bad relationship, it's a reflection. You've attracted somebody into your life who's a reflection of your own psychology in one form or another. Even if you're in an abusive relationship, that abusive relationship is there to try to warn you and try to show you and teach you something about yourself that you need to see. And if you think that it's all the other person and it's just 100% their fault and that there's nothing for you to learn, then it's the reason why so many women go from one abusive relationship to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, because they never learn their lesson. So they can never attract anything but an abusive partner into their life, because they never learn what that abusive partner is there to teach them about themselves. They never learn that because they always fall into the trap of victimhood. So you see, there are many false escapes that the ego mind will trap us in. And these include running away, what we'll call exit, right? And then of course there's the big one, which again, this is not a true escape. This is a false escapes of the ego. Like traveling, like tourism. There's a reason why tourism is just a form of escapism. There's a reason why they call them tourist traps. These places where you go in the world that are designed to attract tourists and take their money, to enamor them with all of this, to mesmerize them, to enamor them with whatever it is, the local color or whatever, but it's all manufactured, right? It's not authentic. It's just, again, it's a tourist trap. It's set up as a business to attract naive people from around the world, mostly Americans, mostly North Americans and Europeans, to go there and to think that they're getting the authentic local culture or local this or local that, but it's just a tourist trap. But the point there that we're making is this idea that people go on vacation as a form of escapism, and then they spend upwards of, half to 3/4 of their time stuck in tourist traps abroad. It is not by accident then that we have these interesting, right, tourist trap, and that the word for entertainment, which is probably the most ubiquitous and common, especially with the internet and streaming services like Netflix and YouTube and TikTok and all the rest of them. Entertainment most closely resembles the word entrainment. In fact, it's only 2 letters different, right? There's an E and a T. If you're not familiar with the word entrainment, it is a physical phenomenon by which one vibration will overpower another and cause it to come to its same vibration. And you can entrain a higher vibration, can entrain a lower vibration, causing it to rise up and match, or a lower vibration can overtake a higher vibration and cause it to go down. But the word means to entrain, means to cause something to begin vibrating at a specific frequency. And that is the word that most closely resembles the word entertainment. The entertainment is there to entrain. In every way, shape, or form, all of these forms of escapism, for example, substances, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or food as drugs, so sugar and chocolate and caffeine, etc., these lead to dependence. Which we often call addiction. Food dependency, food addiction, or substance abuse, substance addiction, substance dependency. Doesn't matter. The two means the same thing. But isn't it interesting that in all of these forms of escapism, they're, as we said, they're false escapes because each one has its downside. Each one has it's a trap, like literally the tourist trap. What's that expression? A moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips, right? So the chocolate bar is so enticing, or the slice of cheesecake, or whatever it is, or the big bowl of pasta, or the bag of crisps, or whatever it is. And the entertainment is so enticing to kill some time, to get your mind off of things. But it's that entrainment process that it can lower your vibration. It can affect you in ways that you might not realize it's affecting you. And this goes for games as well. we could very easily put games under entertainment, but specifically, video games, because most video games tend to make people fall asleep. They play them, again, you can lose yourself for hours in a video game. You can certainly lose yourself for hours binging Netflix and YouTube and the rest of it. But so all of these forms of escapism, they're really false escapes, and they keep you trapped. They keep you imprisoned. And that got us saying, well, if that's true, but nobody knows it, then where are we headed with all of this? But before we head there, Joanne says, hello to all. Glad to finally get here. Thanks, Joanne. Nice to see you. Nice to have you here. And Kundalini King says, good afternoon. So it should go without saying that those of you who are familiar with the film, came out some 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago now, The Shawshank Redemption. It's for those of you who aren't familiar with the film, there's not much we can do about that. But suffice it to say, it's a film about a fellow, Andy Dufresne, who is sent to prison, Shawshank Prison. And the film is about his life spent in prison. And as we were contemplating, and it's, the film is 30 years old, so we're going to be talking spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet, we apologize, but the film is also about a prison break. It's how Andy Dufresne wins his freedom from prison, how he escapes from Shawshank. And Kundalini Kang says, it's a story from the Stephen King book, 4 Seasons. Yeah, it's based on a short story that Stephen King wrote. And it was, as we were contemplating, there was 2 things that happened simultaneously. One, we were contemplating escape and escapism. And we were contemplating these allegories for life. And simultaneously, we watched The Shawshank Redemption. And it turns out that The Shawshank Redemption, its IMDb rating is 9.3 out of 10. It's one of the most highly rated films of all time. In fact, on the service that I watched it on, it has a perfect 10 out of 10 rating. It is the highest ranked film in any streaming film on the streaming platform that we use. It had a perfect 10 out of 10 rating. On IMDb, it's 9.3 out of 10. It's one of the highest, if not the highest ranking film of all time. See, it's the top rated movie. It's number 1 on IMDb. And yeah, it won, a bunch of Oscars and everything else, but it actually was panned by the critics and it bombed in the box office when it came out. People didn't like the name, I guess, but this is one of the highest ranked, most beloved films of all time. There's practically no women in the cast. It's only men. And they're in a prison. There's very little in the way of action, or it's Why is this such a beloved movie? And it's because it is possibly the most perfect allegory for life. And we want to put that into context of a very particular type of activity that relates to escape. It's a game, because we were talking about earlier, some of the analogies and allegories for life, and games and chess came into play. But have you ever heard of an activity known as an escape room? What is an escape room? What is an escape room? Kundalini King says, escape rooms are a blast. Right? So what is it? What is an escape room? If not a kind of prison, that theoretically, at least, you can escape from. Tiffany says, I believe we have them here. They are themed, right? Well, they can be, sure. Kundalini King says it's a puzzle. Okay, so it's a prison. It's a puzzle. Now, most puzzles, the implication here is that they can be solved, right? That's the escape. Right? By solving the puzzle, you escape. That's the implication here. So these words, prison and puzzle, are synonymous in the same way that solved and escape are synonymous. Because if you solve the puzzle, you get out. That's how you solve the puzzle. Now, are you forced into an escape room? Generally speaking, and Kundalini says, yes, sir, in a group, but usually only one person makes it. And Benjamin Ochoa says, it's funny, a Jehovah's Witness recommended this movie to me. Shawshank Redemption. And Benjamin Ochoa also said that he didn't know that. He says he saw it, but he didn't know that it was ranked number 1. What's the thing about an escape room is that, like any puzzle, right? You're left with clues, and you are given the tools. In other words, what you need to escape, to solve the puzzle. Everything that you need to escape has to be inside the room. That's kind of the point, or at least you have access to everything that you need to escape the room. but you're trapped in that room. You can't get out of the room until you solve the puzzle, until you do what you need to do in order to escape. And the thing about an escape room is that you know that you're in there, and you know the point is to get out. What people call awakening, it's imagine waking up one day and being trapped inside a room. You have no idea how you got there. You have no idea who you are. Let's say you have amnesia or whatever, but you have no idea how you got there. And you have no idea how to get out. But imagine if this room was filled with all kinds of escapisms that we talked about over here. If you didn't know any better, right? If you didn't know that you were in an escape room, if you just woke up one day with no memory, with no knowledge, and you were just in this room, if you didn't know it was a puzzle, if you didn't know it was a prison, and if you didn't know it was even possible to escape, but you were bombarded with all of these escapisms or all of these temptations, all of these reasons for you to stay in there, how would you even know to try to escape? What people call awakening, and people think that awakening is the end of the journey, that enlightenment, that awakening is the goal. Awakening or enlightenment is simply waking up to the reality that, oh my God, I'm in an escape room. Until then, you've just been you've just been taking for granted that you're in this place and that's just the way it is, and you've been indulging all these different forms of escapism to avoid the mundane existence, the boredom, the jealousy, the stress, the anxiety, and all the other forms of suffering that come with being trapped in a room, that come with being imprisoned. That room has given you endless escapism. It's basically designed to keep you in the room. Awakening is just realizing that you're actually in an escape room, that it is possible to get out, and that everything that you need to get out is in that room. But so too are all of these escapisms that are trying to distract you, that are trying to give you false escapes, to try to hypnotize you, mesmerize you, and keep you from seeing the clues and the tools available to you to solve the puzzle, to escape the room. This dovetails with the film, The Shawshank Redemption. One of the most highly rated, if not the highest rated movie, most beloved movie of all time, according to not just critics, but viewers. Again, as we said, the rating, the streaming platform that we recently watched it on had a perfect 10 score. And those were viewer scores. But as actually was a combination of critic and viewer scores. But in any case, it was the top rated film. So the streaming service we had the 100 most top rated movies, and Shawshank Redemption was at the top. And it's at the top of IMDb, and probably it may be at the top of many, many other lists. But the point is, it's at the top of those lists for a reason. And it's not because it's a particularly pleasant film to watch. If you're familiar with the film, you know it's not a pleasant movie to watch. It has many, many very unpleasant, uncomfortable, difficult to watch scenes, particularly the rape scenes. Because Andy Dufresne is picked out very early on by the so-called sisters, by Boggs and the sisters, the rapists. But the thing about that film is its allegorical, the way in which it expands the allegory that we're talking about here, of the escape room. For starters, we have the two main characters are Andy Dufresne and Red. Red archetypally, he fulfills several different functions in the narrative, but one of his primary functions is to be a stand-in for the Divine Mother. Red is the guy who can get you things. Red is the one who furnishes Andy with all he needs in order to make his escape. And his character's name is Ellis Lloyd Redding, but everybody just calls him Red. So red, on the spectrum of light, red is the color that is most associated with the feminine. And not only that, red is the one who supplies Andy the oversized posters of the famous actresses. Rita Hayworth, Marilyn Monroe, Raquel Welch. Those are the three divine feminine icons that conceal Andy's path to freedom. And his tool to do that with is this rock hammer. And when Red first sees it, he finally gets the joke that it would take a man 100 years to tunnel out of the prison with that tiny hammer, but Andy did it in less than 20 or less than 30. Can't remember exactly, but pressure and time, that's all it takes. And that rock hammer, you see, the rock upon which I build my church is the philosophical stone. That again is a symbol of alchemy, but it's also related to the Divine Mother. And the hammer, like all divine weapons, whether it's Mjolnir or the sword from the Arthurian legends, or the sword and shield that Athena gives to Perseus, the hero always receives his weapons, the instruments of his freedom, the instruments by which he liberates the land from the evil, are always given to him by the Divine Mother. Andy Dufresne, while he's in Shawshank prison, he builds a library. He is consumed with the accumulation and sharing of knowledge. When he gets the box of records, he puts Mozart on the loudspeakers so the rest of the convicts can hear the arias. It's actually a duet from Le Nausée de Figaro, if we recall correctly. Or it's the Magic Flute. We can't remember which opera it's from, but it's a Mozart opera that he puts on. And Morgan Freeman's character says, and it, in that moment, because to this day, he says, I have no idea what those two Italian ladies were singing. It must have been La Nausée de Figaro, because the Magic Flute is in German. So he says, to this day, I don't know what those two Italian ladies were singing, but what I can tell you is those voices soared like through the heavens, and in that moment, every man in Shawshank felt free. Andy is an instrument of freedom. He is the embodiment of freedom. He is the one who risks life and limb with the captain of the guard in order to win all of his coworkers 3 beers each. After they're tarring the roof of the factory. Oh, Kundalini King says it's Parsifal. Was it Parsifal? Then it wasn't a Mozart opera then, was it? No, it was Mozart. So it was Parsifal. Okay. And he says, this is brilliant, by the way. Andy also recognizes the corruption of the prison, obviously. He becomes a part of it. He has to play along with the corruption. It's the only way that he gets the protection from the guards. That's the only way he gets the other privileges that he gets, including his ability to build the library. He does what needs to be done. He plays the system, in other words. He uses the tools available to him, and he follows the clues. He does what he needs to do in order to survive, in order to maintain hope, and in order to continue his slow but steady process and progress solving the puzzle of that escape room that he's in. Because remember, never lose sight of the connection between these two. We're talking about the same allegories, just two different expressions of the same allegory: imprisonment and escape. And one of the things that keeps him going, of course, is hope. And there's another character in the story, that's Brooks, who is the old librarian, the man whose job Andy Dufresne is essentially given. He ends up replacing Brooks. And Brooks is released on parole, and Brooks ends up taking his life. And when the other convicts are talking about it, it's Red who introduces the idea that Brooks was institutionalized. And Red says, these walls are funny. At first you hate them. At first you hate them. Then after a while you get used to them. And if enough time passes, it gets to be that you depend on them. Now that revelation comes from the character who represents the Divine Mother, the feminine aspect in us. Institutionalized. What is an institution? It's a heartless, soulless corporation is what it is. It's a machine. To be institutionalized, first you hate the institution, then you get used to the institution, then you end up depending on the institution, the machine. Institutionalized is therefore just another way of saying institutionalized is another way of saying to be institutionalized is to be mechanical. And what are some of these things that we're given in our prison that we become dependent on? If not the escapisms, the entertainments, the substances, right? Because what did we say about substances, right? We talked about dependency. And institutionalized if you depend on what's inside the room, then you won't want to ever leave. You have no reason to leave. And there's that scene where Brooks threatens to cut the throat of the other character's, can't remember his name, the other character's neck. He says, what did you say to him to set him off like that? He says, I didn't say anything. I just came here to wish him well. His parole came through. And Brooks is so terrified of having to leave a place that he's lived in for 50 years. It's all he knows. Kundalini King says, forgive me, going to lose service in the National Forest today. This is great. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Well, thanks for dropping by, Kundalini King. And before you leave, we'll just read your other. It says, I worked with institutional men in halfway houses. At night, they cry for their mothers in their dreams. And he said that the film is all about hope. Benjamin said, yeah, the beer scene is nice for some reason, while maybe it implies a taste of freedom. It does, because Red says they could have been tarring the roof of their own houses. That day, they felt like free men. Everything that Andy does for the other inmates in the prison, it makes them feel more free. Think about what he does for the guards. He helps the guards avoid taxes. He does all their taxes. And what's doing taxes if not avoidance of having the governments take your money, right? That's theft avoidance. That's a form of freedom. Taxation is another form of enslavement. Everything that Andy does is about freedom. He is the embodiment of freedom. But he's in that prison. He's in that escape room, and he's got to find a way out. But everything that he does, he stays true to himself. He remains with his integrity, despite the fact that he says, he says, outside I was a straight shooting man, straight as an arrow. I was an honest man. He says, I had to go to prison to become a crook. Which is interesting, because there's tremendous truth in that. We come into this third dimension, and we're subject to all of these mechanical aspects of living in this body, of living in this mind, that make us behave in ways that are considered normal here, but we're living in this corrupt prison, right? Austin says, all I wanted was a Pepsi, Mom. We'll leave it to you guys to figure out the reference. Okay. Joanne says, he had to be confined to a limitation in order to see beyond the limitation. He learns a great deal about himself in prison, what he's capable of and what he's incapable of, and what he really values. And we have that famous line from the film where he says it really comes down to one thing: get busy living or get busy dying. And it's the escape room. It's Shawshank Prison that brings him to that realization. And it was when that other character, that young character, Tommy, that he helps graduate from high school, when Tommy tells the warden that Andy Dufresne is innocent, the warden shoots, has Hadley shoot Tommy. And when that happens, Andy Dufresne realizes that if he waits for the system, he's going to die in prison. The system, the institution, is never going to let him out. In the same way that the escape room is never going to help you escape. Everything that you need to escape is in there. But the institution itself, the room itself, the escape room itself, is designed to keep you trapped in there. That's the point. It's a prison. It's a puzzle. It's not going to help you. It's not going to do it for you. It's only going to offer you false escapes. Tiffany says, all I wanted was a Pepsi. And she laughs. She says, a band called Suicidal Tendencies. Okay. So there's an inside joke people are enjoying. I don't get the reference, but that's fine. I don't need to. In the end, it's when Tommy is murdered, and it's in the middle of a night, stormy night. Andy Dufresne crawls through his tunnel, and he crawls through the sewer pipe. And it's the length of 500 yards, right? So 5 football fields through raw sewage. And there's that iconic scene that even those of you who have never seen the film, you may have seen this. This is that iconic image from the film when Andy Dufresne, he feels freedom. And there's a short, epilogue of the film when Red gets out, when Red has his parole board meeting. Now, 2 things. The first is, let's not dismiss this so quickly, this image and what happens afterwards, because Randall Stevens is the name of the individual that Andy Dufresne sets up all of the bogus bank accounts for. When he's helping Warden Norton launder money and skim off, basically the corruption that's going on in Shawshank prison. Andy Dufresne, who is the one in the background orchestrating all of the banking and the financials, and he's the one that basically conjured this individual, Randall Stevens, this legal entity, conjured him out of thin air. He got a passport, a driver's license, social insurance card, and everything. He got it all by mail. So that when he escapes, he walks into all the banks as Randall Stevens, and he has all the identification. And as Red explains, the signature was a spot-on match. And he withdraws all the money, and he skips town and he goes to Mexico. But from that point on, he's Randall Stevens. This is an important aspect of the allegory of Shawshank Redemption. And when Tiffany says that, I think it was Tiffany who said that there are themed escape rooms. The point of those themed escape rooms is, to the best of our knowledge, is they're sort of like role-playing, where it's like when you play those murder mystery, how to host a murder, those murder mystery dinner theater things that you're supposed to do at home, and you have all these different characters that the people that you invite to your murder mystery party, they're supposed to be role playing these various different characters. The same thing can apply to an escape room. So there's, again, this role-playing aspect to it. But in Shawshank Redemption, it is very clear that Andy Dufresne, in the process of spending all of that time in prison, he slowly began creating a new person. And with tremendous patience over a great deal of time, as he was digging the tunnel out of his cell with the help of his divine mother, who gave him the tools and who gave him the big poster to allow him to do that, at the same time, the corruption in that prison, Andy was transmuting that corruption and using it to build a library for the other convicts, for the other inmates, one of the best libraries in the whole state, in the state prison system, and all the other privileges that he got by helping Norton with that corruption, and he transmuted it into something great. But not only that, he transmuted it into this new person, this new identity. And after he crawls through 500 yards of raw sewage, he transforms in this thunderstorm, in the waters, in the lightning, in the waters. He leaves Andy Dufresne behind in that cell. He's physically not there, but all that he was psychologically and all that he was, that everything that he was that got him into prison in the first place. As he explained to Red, he says, I might not have pulled the trigger, but I drove her away, meaning his wife. I was a hard man to know, and I didn't know how to deal with people, and I drove her away. I drove her away, Red. I killed her. I didn't pull the trigger, but I killed her. I drove her away. He accepts responsibility for the fact that nobody else is to blame other than him for why he's in prison. And accepting that responsibility and being caught up in that corruption and taking the corruption and transmuting it into something beautiful and something positive, and creating out of that corruption a new entity, a new person. When he finally breaks out of his prison, he has that new person waiting for him and all of the funds, all the resources that he needs to go and live this life, this entirely new life. And what is the new life that he chooses to live? He's going to go to Zihuatanejo on the Pacific coast of Mexico. He's going to buy an old hotel on the beach. He's going to buy an old boat, fix it up new, and take his guests out charter fishing. He's going to be a fisherman. And he's going to teach others how to fish. This makes Andy Dufresne a Christ-like figure. Because he goes through the death and resurrection, he becomes an entirely new person. And his entire time in the prison is there making life in Shawshank a little less drab for everybody else. In fact, Red says that line. He says, when that now that they're gone, the world you live in seems a little less bright because they're gone. But then you realize some birds were just not meant to be caged. So, you rejoice, the part of you rejoices knowing that it was wrong to lock them up here in the first place. But a part of you is sad because your world has become that much less bright and more dreary. And those who remember him talk about him often. So it is that hope, it is that light, it is that essence of freedom of liberty that Andy Dufresne brought with him into Shawshank, into the escape room, into the prison, and brightened up that world while he was there, in spite of all the suffering and the hardship that he had to endure. This is someone walking the path of the Bodhisattva. And he put himself in prison by his own actions, by his own choices. And through his own resilience and willpower and patience, and determination and hope and integrity, he won his freedom. He figured out the puzzle. And he got out of the escape room. But not only did he get out of the escape room, his best friend, Ellis Boyd Redding, also got out. Now, how did he get out? Throughout the film, time after time, we are shown Red going to a parole board hearing. And each time, he says the same thing. He says, when he is asked, do you feel you've been rehabilitated? And he says something to the effect of, rehabilitated? Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely. No danger to society here. I can truly say I'm a changed man. And then he gets rejected. And every time he goes to a parole board meeting and he rhymes off the same rote, memorized statement about how rehabilitated he is and how there's no threat to society here, and I can truly say I'm a changed man, his parole gets rejected. What's the lesson there? He's going in to these parole board meetings in a mechanical way. He's institutionalized, remember? He's the one that introduces that word. He even tells Andy at the end, when Andy says, Red, if you ever get out of here, promise me that you go to Buxton and you'll find this rock wall, and there's this big oak tree at the end of this rock wall, and there's something buried there. I want you to that's there for you. And Red says, but I'm institutionalized, like Brooks was. I'm not going to make it on the outside. But Andy makes him promise, and he says, "Sure, Andy, I'll do that." And it's after Andy breaks out, it's after Andy's gone, that Red has a third parole board meeting that we get to see. And he goes in. It's a very young guy now who's cast him. He says, "Please take a seat." And he says, "Do you feel that you're rehabilitated?" And Red, for the first time, speaks openly and honestly from his heart, not mechanically, not his memorized speech. And he says, "Rehabilitated? Now let me see. I don't know what that means." And the young man says, "Well, it means that you're ready to return to society." And Red goes, "I know what you think it means, Sonny. But to me, it's just a word. It's a made-up word. It's a politician's word. So young fellas like you can, feel important and have a job. But what do you want to know? Am I sorry for what I done?" And the young man says, "Well, are you?" And he goes, "There's not a day goes by I don't feel regret. Not because I'm in here, because you think I should. Because I want to be able to talk to that young, stupid kid who committed that terrible crime. I want to talk to him. I want to talk sense to him. Tell him how things are. Tell him like it is. But I can't do that. That young man is long gone, and this old man is all that's left. I got to live with that. So why don't you go on and stamp your form, Sonny, and stop wasting my time? Because frankly, I don't give a damn. And it's then that his parole gets approved. When he speaks from his heart, when he speaks openly and honestly, not mechanically, when he speaks as a free man would, when he speaks freely, when he embodies the essence, the hope, and the gift that Andy Dufresne brought into his life. Likewise, after he gets out and he gets put in the same halfway house, into the same room as Brooks did. And he says, it's clear I'm not going to make it on the outside. There's only one thing that keeps me from breaking my parole. And that's this promise I made to Andy. And he goes to Buxton and he finds the rock wall and he finds the giant oak tree. And he digs up the rock under the wall, the rock that Andy tells him has no earthly business being in a Buxton hayfield. And Red digs up the rock and he finds a box in it and he finds an envelope filled with money and a letter from Andy. And he says, and the letter reads, if you come this far, you've gotten out. And if you come this far, maybe you're willing to go a little further. And then the rest of the film unfolds. But you see, this is the beauty of this film, and the hope is that even the institutionalized, even those who have given up all hope, even those who are mechanical and have just fallen into the routine, because that's another thing that Red tells us about life in prison. He says it's all about routine. Everything's done on a time frame. You're told when to get up. You're told when to eat, when to sleep, when to go to the bathroom. He even says that. He says, I can't squeeze a drop unless I'm given say so. And Andy is able to redeem Red. It's the Shawshank Redemption. It's the redemption that freedom brings. We embody freedom while we're in the escape room, and that we help others escape. That's the path of the Bodhisattva, who enters that prison at tremendous risk and takes on tremendous suffering for the sake of others. But the point of it all is to help others escape, to show them the way out. And that's what's archetypally so beautiful and so universal and so powerful about this film. And why it may be, in some ways, this escape room, this prison analogy, this escape room analogy, but the Shawshank film in specifics may be the perfect analogy for life. Because we have lots of, talking about games and everything else as allegories for life, but it's the specific type of game that an escape room represents. That the whole point of it is to get out of it. But in order for you to see that, to know that, you have to awaken to that fact. You have to know that you're in prison, but that you don't belong there. And you have to recognize the corruption. And inasmuch as we are all tied up in that corruption, we are all tied up in the karma of this planet to one degree or another. And we all have our own egos. We all have our own lust, our own desires. But can we transmute them? Can we make something good out of that? And that new person that we create, the solar bodies, the true self, that is going to be our vehicle for escaping to the supernal worlds, to the worlds beyond the walls, to the world beyond the prison, to the real world, the metaphysical world, the supernal worlds. So all of that is embodied in the Shawshank Redemption, and to one degree or another within this very simple analogy of the escape room. Just recognizing that there is so much in that escape room that's designed to keep us asleep and to keep us imprisoned. And when we really comprehend this analogy, this allegory, we recognize that the prison is here. This is the escape room. It's not out there. We mustn't fall into the same trap as all the people who misinterpret and misunderstand the Matrix. They think the Matrix is out there. The Matrix was never out there. Even in the film, the Matrix the Matrix just exists in people's minds. And so is our escape room. So is our Shawshank prison. And our warden, Norton, and Lieutenant Hadley, the captain of the guard, and everyone and everything and the Boggs and the sisters, those are our egos. That's our lust. Our own demons, our own vices that are taking advantage of us, that are raping us at every opportunity. That's all inside of us, the causes of our suffering. Where's our mouse? There it is. Joanne says, yes, awaken and grow, develop, evolve, refine, transcend, transmute, and escape. In esotericism, we have this expression, to die while you're still alive, so that when you do die, you won't die. We call this psychological death. If this escape room awakening, or the beginning of awakening, is the recognition of the self, the true self. and that your true self is trapped. Because we talked about escapisms, right? All these false escapes, these temporary, consumable ways to avoid our suffering. But there are much more subtle types of escapisms that are included in here. We call them beliefs, identifications, attachments. Habits, everything that makes up this false self. Things that we are identified with and attached to, those imprison us. Benjamin says awakening from the screen and the walls. Yeah, but it's the awakening from the illusion. Because that's the thing about an escape room, is that it's an illusion. It's a creation. It's a construct. Like the Matrix. The false self is a construct. It doesn't exist. It's a conceptualization. It only exists as a series of habituated tendencies, of conditioned beliefs, of identification, of attachment. It's all subjective filtering, layered upon layers and layers and layers and layers of the light of the true self. This is where this comment of a screen comes in, because everything that's in that escape room is a projection of our ego mind. Because as we said at the outset, everything exists in the field of consciousness, but here on our level, that consciousness is conditioned. Benjamin Raphael says, I think the allegory that this life is like an escape room is also similar to the Gnostic notion of the archons being the prison warden, and we need to get past them to be saved. So Gnostics gave us the codes to escape this false reality through the Holy Scriptures. Well, that's true. And the comment about the archons is apropos, but that's their job. That's their job. You see, this is where the allegory of chess comes into play. You need an opponent. But in the context of the escape room or Shawshank prison, in the context of a prison, as Benjamin says here, you need a warden. You need guards. But here's the catch. In an escape room, there isn't really a warden. There aren't really any guards. What we have to understand is that we have a false self and we have a true self. We should have drawn this box bigger because we're running out of space. So you know what? We're gonna draw an arrow here instead. The self that is identified with the escape room, the false self, is the warden. All of our egos are the guards and the sisters, right? The ones who rape us in the shower when we least expect it. They come up from behind us and they sodomize us. Those are our egos. They ambush us. You know it. Observe yourself. When you're weak, when you're low, they take advantage of you. When you're at your most vulnerable, that's when egos strike. When you're the weakest and when they're the strongest. So, for example, everybody who's had a terrible week, or anybody who suffers around the time of a full moon or goes through greater suffering, that's because egos are emboldened and they're stronger during a full moon because the moon is mechanical nature. There's more conditioned light during a full moon. Joanne asks, where do the archons fit in, Atlas? This is something that we try not to get too bogged down in, because this is really, what's the right word we're looking for? This is really like foundational, esoteric. What's even the right word? Archons are essentially the antithesis of the aeons. And it's the aeons and the archons that are, quote unquote, at war with one another. Archons are behind mechanical nature. But the practical understanding or application of that, there is none. Knowing that doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form. There is zero practical application to knowing that. Why? Because your battle is not with archons. Your battle is with your egos. That's where the rubber meets the road in our life and in our spiritual journey, is what we're trying to point out with this escape room analogy. Don't look for wardens, and don't look for anything other than what's in front of you, right? So a soldier in war has to fight the enemy in the trenches. Okay, I can't be worried about, if I'm a soldier in the First World War, I have to worry about the soldiers in the trenches a couple hundred yards away. That's what I have to worry about if I want to remain alive. I can't be worried about the generals miles away, or the 5-star generals hundreds of miles away, or the president 1,000 miles away. Who cares? That has absolutely zero. That's not my concern. I'm a soldier in the trenches. I have to worry about the other soldiers in the other trench. That's the reality of my war. That's where the battle takes place. So all this talk of aeons and archons and all that, yes, fine. If you want to have an academic conversation about that, you can go and study that at glorian.org or 1,000 different places, because there are no shortage of people that will tell you that they're experts on the archons and the aeons and they've read the Piece de Sophia 1,000 times, and they have all these wonderful interpretations of all of that, and they're all wrong, but it doesn't matter. They'll tell you how right they are. But right or wrong, it's irrelevant because they're all in their head. It's all just intellectual mumbo jumbo, and they're not doing any of the work. They're not actually fighting the war. So this is why we never mention them. And there's so many other things we never mention, we never bring up. Because in our experience, there's what really matters at our level, and that's where all of our focus and attention needs to be, on the practical rubber meets the road stuff. If all of us get to a point where we break out of this escape room, and then we can go to the Akashic records every night, whenever we wish, because we're wide awake and we've liberated our consciousness and we're basically waking Buddhas, then we can go to the Akashic records, or we could go to other planets. We can go to the temples in the supernal worlds, and we can learn about the archons from the angels and archangels directly. But until then, until we are able to do that, what getting everybody's opinion and interpretations of what aeons and archons are is not going to help anybody get anywhere. That's our philosophy of how we approach this stuff. Is that the information is on a need-to-know basis, and people don't need to know about the nature of the absolute because they're still stuck in three-dimensional reality. They'll learn about the nature of the absolute when they get there. But let's help them get there. And then they can go and discover that in the only real way anybody can know these things, and that's through direct experience. So that's why we don't mention it, and we don't dwell on it. Not that it's not interesting, or not that we couldn't spend hours, dozens of hours, hundreds of hours on this stuff, because that's why there are the books of Master Samael. He wrote over 60 books, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of hours on glorian.org covering every conceivable possible facet of esotericism. Hundreds of hours and thousands of pages. So we leave it to them, because they know so much more about this stuff than we do anyway. Right? That's another aspect of it, right? We're not an expert on aeons and archons and all that. We're not supposed to be. That's not what we're here to do. Benjamin says, archons, Gnostically speaking, are the rulers put here by the aeons, I want to say. Well, this is the other reason that it gets very convoluted and confusing when you try to start understanding this stuff with the intellect, like so many people do, and then they misunderstand. Because the archons actually work for the aeons. The Black Lodge works for the White Lodge. And when you start talking in those terms, then people get very confused very easily. Well, and how is it that they're at war with each other if they work for each other? And all this type of stuff. It becomes very convoluted, and it's very difficult because it's so nuanced. It's something that you can easily comprehend. And that's why the escape room analogy is so good. Because the escape room is there to help you escape. Honestly, but everything that the escape room is there trying to do is keep you trapped. But it's also there to help you awaken and discover your true self and your capabilities and your abilities that you need in order to escape, and to show others how to escape. Like Andy Dufresne did in Shawshank Prison. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of nuance. Like we often said, the same mountain that is helping you reach the summit is trying to kill you every step on the way. With every handhold, with every foothold, the very mountain that's allowing you to summit its peak is trying to kill you. It's trying to make you fall. That's the escape room. That's Shawshank Prison. It's trying to keep you trapped, to try to keep you imprisoned. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So to that, Joanne says, okay. She says, thank you. I hear you and can appreciate what you were saying. Exactly. Our battle is with ego and conditioned mind. She goes, yes, let's focus on what is in our closest trenches. And Tiffany says, I haven't noticed before now that archons aren't mentioned here in these studies. Well, now you know. Now you've noticed. And again, there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And it's not because they're not important, or not because it's not interesting. It's just, it's not useful. It's not helpful. It really isn't. We are all about, again, even this whole week, we've been battling in a very personal, intimate way with our demon. Okay. So, and we've been dealing with our own forms of escapism and facing the reality that we don't have an ability to escape yet. We're stuck in this room. All we have is, a little escapism here and a little escapism there when things get really tough, when things get really dark. So we have to be compassionate towards ourselves as well. Now, theoretically, in an ideal world, if you follow strict guidelines or strict edicts or dogmatic approaches to esotericism, to Gnosticism, you would say, well, you should never indulge any form of escapism because you're just feeding the ego. The ego is making you suffer in order to get you to indulge in those forms of escapism, and you're actually feeding the very demon that way. And maybe theoretically that might be true. In our case, it's a matter of coping with an enormous amount of built up, pent up negative energy, which is being created by an entity that we have no control over. And it's like we have to throw it a bone. We have to do something to let off some steam, because otherwise it'll get the best of us. And we're kind of being vague because we don't want this live stream to be about us necessarily, but at the same time, we all have to find our own way, our own path, dealing with that which we are unable to eliminate, which we are unable to escape from. And for better or for worse, at the moment, we're stuck with what we are stuck with. And that means that on a regular basis, especially in the wintertime, And usually around the full moon, we are struck by a terrible, terrible, debilitating depression. And that's our demon raging in the subconscious mind. It's beyond our reach. There's nothing we can do about it. It's just completely draining us of energy. But it's not so much that it's just draining us of energy. It's making of that energy a tremendously negative energy. And could it be, or should it be, that we should use all of our willpower to resist the urge to binge on junk food, for example, or play a video game or whatever to try to escape, try to experience some escapism and get a reprieve from all of that? Maybe technically, yes. Maybe we're a terrible Gnostic, but how many times have you heard us say we're a bad Gnostic? We're a terrible Gnostic. Then maybe we shouldn't indulge in that. Maybe we shouldn't, indulge in eating chocolate or snack food or whatever it is that we, and maybe we're weak for doing that. But it's only for a few days, and it helps us get through those few days. And then things get back to normal the rest of the other 25 days out of the month. 25, 26 days out of the month. Then is it the best approach? Is there a better approach? Well, it's better us doing this than having seizures. That's one thing that we've arrived at. And we'd much rather have control, 25 days out of the month and have our suffering condensed and isolated to a few days during a full moon, when it's become so intense and so debilitating that we have to turn to some escapism to deal with it and cope with it. But it's enough to throw the angry rabid dog a bone so that we can get through those few days, and then things can get back to normal the rest, and we can go on with our lives. All of that seems to us better than being ambushed by the demon anytime throughout the month when we least expect it, or being overcome with depression, or overcome with whatever we're being overcome with, spread out throughout the month. So whatever we've managed to do, and however we're managing to do it, it's for us a marked improvement over where we've been in the past, where we never knew when we were going to get hit with a seizure, or we never knew when we were going to get hit with depression. At least now we know, and it's isolated to a certain time of month during the full moon, when the demon feels emboldened and powerful enough to try to take control over us. And even then, it can only get so far. It's a huge improvement over where we were years ago or decades ago, when we were having full-blown seizures, and sometimes we had depression that lasted for months. So are we where we need to be? No. Have we gotten out of the escape room? No. And are we perfect? No, by no stretch of the imagination. Are we? Nor have we ever claimed to be. But we have to have compassion for ourselves, and we have to know ourselves. and we can't compare ourselves to anybody else, and we cannot allow any teaching from any teacher to become a dogmatic, rote, mechanical, you can't do this, you can't do that, you must not do this, you must do it this way and not the other way. Because they don't know you, they don't know me, just as I don't know you. I don't know where you've been. The only person that we can compare ourselves to is the person that we used to be. Are we making progress? Have we come? How far have we come? It doesn't make the suffering any easier. It doesn't make, depression doesn't get any easier. But in a way, having it isolated and contained and being able to isolate it to, okay, a couple days of binging on junk food and some chocolate and maybe some video games, like for 2 or 3 days, that's not the end of the world, right? And if you're doing that in order to placate the source of your suffering, like, again, I very much do liken it to throwing a rabid dog a bone. Well, throw the dog a bone. If it means that the dog is going to leave you alone for the rest of the month, for another 25 days, you're going to be left alone, then yeah, fine. I'll live with the 3 days of binging on junk food and chocolate and video games. I'll live with it. I'll deal with it. Because I've been on the other side of being attacked and ambushed. You never know when, you never know how, and you never know for how long. I've lived through that, where the demon was in control of my life. And I'm not going back that way. I'm not going back in that direction. So it's part of my escape room. Whereas, I've the rest of the time, I'm in no need of escapism. I'm in no need of, I have no cravings for junk food or anything else the rest of the, 25 days, 27 days out of a month. So I know exactly what and why things are going and where it's coming from and what's the cause of it. But I also know that while I'm in the escape room, like Andy Dufresne in prison, sometimes I've got to participate in the corruption of that prison, knowing full well that I'm undertaking this slow process of transmuting that into something else. Right? We have to be able to see ourselves. We have to be able to observe ourselves in that suffering and observe ourselves going through these things in order to know what the cause of that is and have something to work towards. As Joanne says here, the escape room is like a tool. Benjamin says he agrees with that reason. I think that when he was referring to not talking about archons. And Jennifer says, I deal with it off and on all month due to the female hormone cycle, which is something we can't relate to obviously on that level, but it's funny because once a month we have to deal with depression. But it's due to the full moon, so it's related to, because the female hormonal cycle is also related to the moon and the activity of the moon. Tiffany says, I like that you acknowledge being gentle with oneself and acknowledgement of the progress. Oftentimes we forget to look from where we were. being gentle with oneself. One of the hardest lessons that we had to get over was the fact that we were terribly hard on ourselves for a long time. And rest assured that if we have a bag of Doritos or, whatever, rest assured that the voices in the head are there. The voice is the demon in our head. It's the demon that's getting us to have that bag of Doritos. Right? And the voices are there, the judgmental voices, the voices of condemnation, the voices of self-judgment and condemnation and kicking ourselves and beating ourselves up, and they're there. I won't deny it. I just observe them. I don't pay them the same due that I used to, where I would let them get to me. I say, look, yeah, okay, you know what? I had a moment of weakness, but hey, you know what? It is what it is. And I've found a way to be strong 25, 26, 27 days out of a month. If the trade-off is I have to be weak for 3 or 4 or 5 days out of a month, then gosh darn it, so be it. If that's the trade-off, that's a mathematical calculation. But on the level of, on the line of life and the line of being, which we've talked about before, that our that's not what I wanted to do. Let's see if we can do this. Okay. On the life can be deemed as a mathematical computation. This is the line of being, and this is the line of life. So the line of being, the line of life only goes in one direction, but the line of being goes up and down. If over time we're going in this direction, that means over any period of time, we're increasing our level of being. So whereas before, in my life, it's actually probably not an accurate if before in our life we were something like, we were down here somewhere, but now we're up here somewhere, then the trajectory is good and it's positive. Are we out of the woods? No. Are we perfect? No. Are we out of the escape room? No. But we're making progress and we're heading in the right direction. So, whereas before, maybe we had 3 or 4 good lucid days out of a month. The rest of the time, 25 days out of the month, we were having seizures. We were binging on junk food. We were playing video games, hundreds and hundreds of hours of video games every month. And addicted to Facebook and all the rest of it. That wasn't so long ago. Now, last year was testament to that. We have a 355-page book available on Amazon that's testament to where we are at in our life, where last year we spent so much time in a lucid place, and writing and creating and publishing and editing, and then every week now with these live streams and then making the videos out of them, where we are at, generally speaking, that we have 3 or 4 days of really down in the dumps crap a month. Whereas before we were 25 days down in the dumps crap a month and maybe 3 or 4 good lucid days. Now it's the reverse. It's the inverse of that. So yeah, it sucks to be in the middle of those 3 or 4 crappy, shitty days. Of course, it sucks. And of course, you want those days to go away. And you want to be able to say that you've overcome that and everything else. But we're not there yet. But we're so much further ahead than where we were. And so this is the small victories. We have to be, as Tiffany says here, right? To be gentle on ourselves is to be compassionate, to know yourself, to be conscious and aware and know what it is you're facing, and how that, what kind of a hold it used to have over your life, and how far you've come, how its hold over your life has weakened. This is a good thing. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have a hold over you anymore. Doesn't mean that it can't get to you anymore. Doesn't mean that you don't have your moments of weakness and days of weakness. We all slip and fall. Next week, we're going to be talking about Easter. We're going to be talking about the crucifixion and the stage of the cross, the passion of the Christ. The Christ falls. Jesus falls on his way to Golgotha with his cross on his back. He falls the first time, the second time, the third time. He falls. None of us should expect everything to be smooth sailing all the time on the path. This escape room is hard. Shawshank Prison, it's not a cakewalk. We just want, sometimes you just want to be able to grab these new age this cult of positivity people and just shake them violently and smack them across the face a few times and smack them back into reality. Don't you see? You're in hell. We are in hell. We are in our own Shawshank Prison. There's no rainbows and unicorns and all that nonsense. So yeah, we need to find compassion for ourselves and for others, and recognize that we can't begin to understand their suffering. As much as I'm here and as much of the suffering that I go through and depression and everything else, I still don't know what other people go through. I have an idea. I have my own suffering to use as a reference point. But I don't know how a young mother feels when their child is killed, or older parents feel when their teenage child commits suicide. I'm never going to know what that feels like. I don't have any children. And God forbid if I did have children, God forbid that they end up committing suicide just so that I could know what they're going through. And even then I wouldn't know what they're going through. Because it's a personal, individual journey. We can give guidance, we can give help, we can point in directions, but we cannot prescribe antidotes, and we cannot prescribe solutions. We can give you a general framework. We can explain to you using analogy and allegory the nature of all of our journeys, the nature of all of our lives, It's an escape room. That's the point. That's the fundamental essence. The false self is the escape room, and the true self is trapped inside. But just like Andy Dufresne in Shawshank Prison, the true self can exert and exude and express its true nature, which is to be free. And we can be that being of light even when we're trapped inside of this false self. We don't have to wait until we are awakened, enlightened Buddhas, right? We can be as imperfect as we are. We can exude and express as best as we can the light and the perfection that we have available to us. In the same way that Andy Dufresne did it in the Shawshank Redemption. So that no matter who we are or wherever level that we're at on this mathematical calculation, on the line of life and line of being, it doesn't matter. Oh, sorry, my shoulder. It doesn't matter where we are at. Okay, because we're all going to be in different places. Every person is on a different place on this mathematical calculation. But no matter where you are at, this is true to one degree or another. And to one degree or another, you have the ability to shine and connect with your true self and work with your true self to solve Joanne says, this really makes sense, Atlas. I can see how my own situation much more clearly. I can see my own situation much more clearly as a result of what you are saying here. Well, if it's useful to you, then we're happy because we were this close to canceling today's live stream because we're really not. It's been tough. It's been a very tough week. Benjamin says, we need stay on that trajectory. The X and Y are events and experiences. This is a level of being. So when you say life, okay, this is measured in time, even though time doesn't exist. But these are the experiences, right? These are the events and experiences on this line. You would call this the x-axis, right? We call this the y-axis, if I'm right. So the events and experiences are this line, measured by time. So events and experiences. Your level of being is, we say, gnosis, self-evident experiential knowledge, that which we seek. Oh, thanks, Benjamin. You see, this is the kind of week we've been having. Okay. So, again, so the x-axis is life. These are the events and experiences on the x-axis. The y-axis is level of being. So that's gnosis. That's self-evident experiential knowledge. That's that which we seek. In other words, this is what we gain from the events and experiences, what we've extracted, how we've transmuted, how we've transformed the events and experiences in our life, how we've learned, how we've grown. So yeah, thanks for letting us know, Benjamin, that it wasn't on screen. We were so focused on what we were drawing, we didn't realize. But yeah, that's just the kind of week we've been having. That's just where we are right now. And every time we reach for this stupid pen, our shoulder stings something fierce. Um, it never rains, but it pours, right? So it's just adding insult to injury, or in our case, injury to insult. But honestly, that's really all we had to work with coming in today. Is this analogy and this film. If you have a chance next time, when you see it, it's on television all the time, and you can see it on various streaming services. It's pretty easy to find if you don't have it on video, but it's fairly easy to find. I say it's 30 years old now, so but you'll hopefully see now why it's such a beloved movie, because again, it's so. Is it the perfect analogy? We're going to go out on a limb here and say no analogy is perfect, no allegory is perfect, but it has what so many other analogies and allegories are missing, and that is this aspect of imprisonment, of containment, of being trapped. Even though the first Matrix film had it for whatever reason, it didn't land. And maybe it was because it was too thinly veiled. Maybe it was because it was too similar. Because Shawshank Redemption is such a beloved film. It's the archetypal power of the symbolism. And even though it's like, because everybody's like connects on such a deep level to it, no sci-fi, no robots, no androids, no AI, right? Just a corrupt warden, stone walls, and a friendship, and hope. And what comes out of that is this incredibly powerful allegory for life. Does anyone have any Benjamin says, yeah, awesome, very true. He was commenting on this, the level of being, that which we gain from our events and experiences. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Or Jennifer says, I found the moon to amplify our vibration during the 3 to 4 times around the full moon. 3 to 4 days around the full moon. During a full moon, the sun and moon are in opposite signs. So there's a conflict potential. But if we attune ourselves to anticipate animosity during this time, we will most definitely have it amplified. We have to control our experience by tempering our thoughts. Same with women and the female hormone cycle. And she says 3 to 4 days. If we attune ourselves to anticipate animosity during this time, we will most definitely have it amplified. We have to control our experience by tempering our thoughts. Same with women and the female hormone cycle. Okay. So what if we understand what you're saying here, we try to put it in our own words and you tell us if we're on the right track. You're saying that if we anticipate that we're going to have a rough time, it's going to be worse? We're going to be making it worse because we're anticipating it? Yeah, you're saying that expectations create our experience. Yeah, we can't speak for everyone. We can only speak for ourselves. And that's definitely not the case with me. That's not the case with us. Right? We don't expect we don't experience depression because we expect to. So it's just a fact. So this we're not saying that this isn't possible for some people, that because thoughts are powerful and they can lead to outcomes. So belief, for example, belief is a very powerful, I mean, look at the placebo effect, right? Belief is very powerful, can lead to outcomes. But we're not imagining our depression. And we're not believing our condition into existence. Right? It's not, our condition is not psychosomatic. So while we're not discounting what you're saying here, in our case, it doesn't apply. Because what we are experiencing. I'm not believing the pain in my shoulder. I didn't believe or expect the pain in my shoulder to come back. It just came back. So that's something that I'm experiencing, not because I believe it's there, but because it's there. I mean, you can put your hand on my shoulder and hear it clicking as I move it. That's not imagined. That's not a belief. That's objective reality in this physical realm. So that's not to say that what you're saying is incorrect, but it's incorrect to say that it's not accurate to say that everything is psychosomatic. That's not accurate either. There's a balance between the two. And Is it possible that there's a downward spiral and negative feedback loop? Is it possible that my own thoughts are making things far worse than what they need to be? I'm willing to concede that as a possibility. But then again, if you knew where we had been and where we had come from and how far we've come, then that's far less likely a possibility, or at least it's not as acutely problematic as perhaps it might have been. Because surely in the past, you're right, we would have been wallowing in our own misery and making things 10 times worse. But anyway, so we get what you're saying in terms of thoughts creating our reality. Benjamin says, or Jennifer, well, no, Jennifer follows up. She goes, it's what I found for myself. Not saying it is that way for you, but the energies during a full moon absolutely will amplify your expectations. I know this from my experience, not others. Okay. No, fair enough. Fair enough. You're sharing your experience. We're sharing our experience because epilepsy, the nature of epilepsy is that it strikes when you least expect it. It's the nature of the illness. No one expects to get seizures. No one goes through life expecting to get seizures. Seizures happen, and they happen when you least expect them. And very often they happen when you least want them. For example, like when you're driving. Now, nobody drives expecting to have seizures, because if you expect to have a seizure, you don't get in a car, you don't get behind a wheel if you're expecting to have a seizure. So from that standpoint, the depression that we suffer from is the same nature. It has the same nature. Only it's not a seizure that we're getting, it's a sudden fit of depression that we're getting. It just so happens that we've weakened the demon's hold over us such that it only is able to assert that control over us, to have that effect on us in or around during a full moon. Now, it's not because we're expecting to feel depressed during a full moon. In fact, this time it's begun sooner than last. So we definitely weren't expecting it this time around. So it just happens. So, but this is relatively new for us in terms of equating our or recognizing that we get. This is a relatively new thing for us, because before it wasn't. We never equated it. We never recognized that it was during a full moon that this was happening. This is just only a recent discovery we made, that it happens to be around a full moon. And maybe it was because last year we were so busy writing our book that we didn't bother with it. We didn't notice it as much. And prior to that, we would get depression whenever. It would happen whenever. Again, when we least expected it, and when it was most debilitating, when it was the worst timing. How can you express this? The worst possible time. The timing was just uncanny. So again, now it's just shifted, and we just became aware of this. It just happened to be around the same time, but it's not. We don't expect it to. Again, I don't want to dwell on it. Let's go back to Benjamin here. He says, it's this moon that makes us go to liminal states of depression. I know that feeling very well. And Tiffany says, no questions, but I will say the Hamsa meditation has been so profound this past week. I've really applied this one, and it's been amazing on so many levels. Thank you for sharing it, a game changer. Do you mean the psychological judo, or the Hamsa is pranayama, so we're just, or the internal meditation? Anyway, we're just wondering which one, because Hamsa meditation is it's a little vague. We're not sure which meditation we're referring to. So Tiffany says, shoulder issue, infrared therapy. Give it a try if you haven't already. No, we haven't. We had this shoulder problem. Oh, and she goes, yeah. She said yes, pranayama, yes. The shoulder thing. We had the shoulder problem well over a year ago, and we did some just some physio exercises and it got better, and it was fine, and all of our exercise and everything, it was like not aggravating it. We weren't sleeping on it wrong. Like it was really doing well. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, this past week, it's like it reset. It went all the way back to like 18 months ago. And it started clicking again. It's like overnight. It's like it regressed. 18 months of physio and everything just went out the window, and it just regressed back to where it was. And it was like we were starting from ground zero again, and we're unable to move our shoulder, and like it's like it was just and this really, frankly, is what triggered the premature sliding into depression, because it was just so aggravating that we had spent all this time and, taking care of our shoulder and nursing it back to health. And then overnight, and we cannot for the life of us identify what we did or what we didn't do in order to cause it to just basically regress back to where it was. So maybe it just comes with the territory. It comes with being in our 50s now. Maybe this is just par for the course, right? The body deciding, this is gonna blow out now. It's like when you drive an old car, right? You're driving along, everything's working fine. It's been working fine for the past 50,000 miles. Nah, let's just blow out the transmission. It's no particular reason, just to make life interesting or something. So, but that's really what's kind of sent us slipping down a slippery slope and then into a nosedive, and we just sort of spiraled out from there when this thing grabbed hold of us. It's like, because it's like, if you've ever had shoulder, it's like you can't, it's the worst it's, first of all, it's the most, like we said over dinner the other night, so we don't want to get struck down by lightning or anything, but it's one of the most bizarrely designed aspects of the human body. It's the most complex joint there is. It's so susceptible to getting screwed up because it's so bloody complex and complicated, because it has to move in so many different axes of rotation and everything else. And ow. So anyway, Jennifer says, when I have pain or disease creep in, I learn about the metaphysical causes of it. It's amazing how much I've learned about things I'm holding on to and healing I need to do. We don't discount the possibility that it's a metaphysical cause. However, we've spent a great deal of time exploring that possibility, and it's very, very hard to accept that there's a metaphysical or somehow psychosomatic or some other cause for our shoulder thing when you can physically hear the different bones in there like catching and clicking, and you can put your hand on it and you can feel what's catching and clicking and popping. And so we don't discount the possibility of a metaphysical cause, but if there is a metaphysical cause, it sure knows how to hide, because it won't reveal. We can't find it in meditation, and all we know is that the physical symptoms and the physical like impingements and everything that are going on in our shoulder are audible. You can feel them, you can hear them, you can feel them, you can touch them. They're there, they're real, they're not mental, right? So there's definitely a physical aspect to it. And as we said, over the last 18 months, we were doing physio and everything else and our exercises, and it was markedly just on this nice curve of improvement to the point where the shoulder wasn't even giving us any problems anymore. And then all of a sudden, bang, overnight, it's like, so again, maybe after the full moon is over, maybe it'll all magically go away. That would be nice. We're not expecting that, though. We're not counting on that by any means. Anyone have any other questions or comments? Anything to share? Anybody else going through having a rough time this week, or anybody wanting to share anything? Or has anybody tried any of the meditations from last week since we did last week? If no one has any more comments or questions or anything else, then we'll just throw this up one last time. We want to thank everyone for being here with us today. We want to apologize for not being up to snuff. We hope that next week things will get better. And next week will be Easter Sunday. So we're planning on devoting really, if you want to try to put into context, this would have been episode 13, right? Because last week was episode, or is today episode 12? I can't remember. In any case, since 12 episodes ago, without planning it, all of our live streams week after week have been going through a kind of progression without planning it this way, or at least I didn't plan it this way. And it really feels like, this episode, it's like we really are in the pit. And next week being Easter, and all that Easter represents, it's almost as if here in this episode today we're all in prison, but next week it's going to be what happens after you get out. And the process of making that escape. And it's not an easy process. So just as being in prison isn't easy, getting out isn't easy. And again, Shawshank Redemption shows us that. Andy Dufresne's journey is not an easy journey, and his escape is not an easy escape. But the promise of going through all this work and going through all this suffering and undertaking this journey, the promise of it all is given to us through Easter. Because in the story of Easter itself, we will see this room appear again in a very different way. So Tiffany says, I hope your shoulder gets better soon. I hope so too, Tiffany. I really do. Because one of the most discouraging things about it is how it impedes our ability to exercise. That's the worst part about it. And she said episode 12. So we thought, yeah, we were right about that. Jennifer says, thanks for today's episode. Appreciate you. Well, we appreciate you, Jennifer, for being here. Thank you for your feedback and your comments. She goes, feel better next week. We hope so. We'll do our best. We'll do our best. Oh, speaking of which, our father's caregiver is taking a trip, which means that we're going to be looking after our father ourselves this week. So we may have a lower production ability to produce videos from this live stream. We're not even sure how much good content we have to be able to produce, to be able to get from today, but we don't know how much we're going to be able to do next week and how productive we're going to be, because we're going to be alone taking care of my of my dad. So just to let you know, and we will have family coming, but to the best of my knowledge, I will be able to have 2:00 next Sunday, on Easter Sunday. We will be having our live stream. So I don't plan to need to cancel. So, and I've been told by family members that I don't need to cancel. So we should be fine for next week for 2:00, same time, same day. Okay. All right. So we have, again, Jennifer says, feel better this week or this next week. Yes. Thank you. Benjamin says, thank you for sharing many wonderful insights today, sir. Have a blessed week ahead. May your shoulder get better. Yes, we hope so. Thanks, Benjamin. Joanne says, thank you, Atlas. It was really wonderful. Prayers for you and your family. Thanks. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you for being here. Benjamin says, take care, sir. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, all of you. Have a wonderful week. Have a blessed Good Friday. And we hope to see you all next Sunday on Easter Sunday. And then we will hopefully be in a much better place, and hopefully we'll be able to share with you that which will truly usher in a new sunrise and a new spring and a new day and a new dawn. And we have faith that it'll be so. Can't speak for the shoulder, but for the rest of it, we can say it'll be so. So thank you all again, and hope to see you again soon. Have a good week. And as always, we say inferential peace. Take care, everyone.